My son sent me a text on Christmas Eve telling me to stay away or I would be in danger. I did not listen. I drove my rusted pickup truck through a Colorado blizzard to save him. But when I arrived, what I saw through the window made my blood boil. His in-laws were drinking champagne and feasting like kings in his house while my son was nowhere to be seen. I broke into the basement and found him. He was not just hurt. He was chained to a support pillar like a rabid animal, his leg broken and rotting. But the true horror started when his wife walked down the stairs, not with a key, but with a glass of wine and a smile. What happened next forced me to unleash a revenge so calculated it became a legend in our town. Before I tell you how I destroyed them, please tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you think family should never betray family. My name is Jackson Reed, but everyone calls me Jack. I am 72 years old. To the world. I am just a retired truck driver, living on Social Security, driving a Ford F-150 from 1990. That sounds like a dying tractor. People look at my oil-stained flannel shirts and my calloused hands and they see a man who scraped by his whole life. They see a simple old man who probably counts pennies to buy coffee. I let them think that. It is safer that way. What nobody knows, not even my own son Brandon, is that Reed Logistics was not just a small trucking company. It was an empire I built from one truck to a fleet of 400. When I sold it 5 years ago, I did not walk away with a pension. I walked away with $80 million and a portfolio of real estate trusts that makes me one of the wealthiest men in the state. I kept it secret because I wanted Brandon to build his own character. I wanted him to be a man, not a trust fund baby. And he did. He became a brilliant architect. But 6 months ago, he stopped calling. He stopped visiting. He told me he was busy with a massive project in Denver. I believed him because I wanted to respect his hustle. But then came the text message on Christmas Eve. It was 11:42 at night. The wind was howling outside my cabin in the foothills. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Brandon. The message was short and terrified. Dad, do not come for Christmas. They are here. You will be in danger. Please stay away. I stared at the screen. My thumbs hovered over the glass. They. He meant Vanessa, his wife, and her vultures of parents, Gordon and Beatrice. I had never liked them. They were the kind of people who checked the brand of your watch before they shook your hand. But danger. Brandon was 6'2". He played linebacker in college. He was not a man who used the word danger lightly. I tried to call him back. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. A cold feeling started in my gut. It was the same feeling I used to get on the interstate right before a tire blew out at 70 miles an hour. It was the instinct of disaster. I did not stay away. I grabbed my keys, I grabbed my tire chains, and I grabbed the tire iron I kept under the driver's seat. I walked out into the storm. The snow was coming down sideways, biting at my face like needles. My old truck groaned when I turned the key, but the engine fired up. I slammed it into four-wheel drive and headed toward the highway. The drive to Brandon's estate usually took an hour. That night, it took 3. The roads were sheets of black ice hidden under powder. I saw cars in ditches. I saw emergency lights flashing in the distance. But I did not stop. I drove with the focus of a man hauling hazardous materials. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Why would Brandon tell me to stay away? Why did he sound so small in that text message? The silence between us for the last 6 months started to feel less like work and more like a wall someone else had built. I pulled up to the iron gates of his property just before 3 in the morning. The keypad was dead or disabled. I did not care. I drove my truck through the landscaping, flattening a row of expensive imported hedges to bypass the gate. I parked in the shadows of the pine trees away from the main driveway. The house was massive, a modern glass and stone fortress that Brandon had designed himself. It was lit up like a beacon in the storm. I killed the engine and watched. The driveway was filled with cars, a new Range Rover, a Mercedes G-Wagon, and Brandon's vintage Porsche. I crept through the snow toward the living room window. My boots crunched on the ice, but the wind was loud enough to mask the sound. I looked inside. The fireplace was roaring. A tree that must have been 12 feet tall was covered in gold ornaments, and there they were. Gordon was wearing a tuxedo, holding a bottle of Dom Perignon. Beatrice was draped in a fur coat that looked like it cost more than my truck, laughing with her head thrown back. Vanessa was sitting on the leather sofa opening gifts. They were celebrating. They were feasting. But where was Brandon? It was his house. It was his money. I scanned the room. I scanned the kitchen, visible through the open concept layout. No Brandon. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost melted the snowflakes on my eyelashes. They were partying in my son's house while he sent me texts about danger. I knew I could not just knock on the front door. If Gordon was there, he likely had his hunting rifles. He was a man who liked to brag about his trophies. I needed to get in without them knowing. I needed to find Brandon first. I circled to the back of the house. The snow was deeper here, up to my knees. I remembered that Brandon kept a spare key hidden inside a fake sprinkler head near the patio for the gardener. Vanessa never paid attention to things like maintenance, so I hoped she did not know about it. I dug through the snow with my frozen fingers. I found the plastic nozzle. I twisted it. The key fell into my palm, cold and heavy. I unlocked the mudroom door and slipped inside. The heat of the house hit me instantly, smelling of expensive pine candles and roasting meat. I could hear the music from the living room, Sinatra singing about peace on earth. It made me sick. I moved silently through the hallways. My trucking days taught me how to move quietly around sleeping lot lizards and thieves at rest stops. I checked the ground floor office. Empty. I checked the guest suite. Empty. Then I heard it. A sound coming from beneath the floorboards. It was a low, rhythmic thumping, like something hitting concrete. It was coming from the basement door. Brandon had designed the basement as a state-of-the-art home gym and wine cellar. It was soundproofed. I put my ear to the heavy oak door. I heard a moan, a sound of pure animal misery. My hand went to the knob. It was locked from the outside with a heavy-duty deadbolt that had been installed recently. The wood around the lock was fresh splintered slightly. This was not the original hardware. I didn't have picks. I had a tire iron in my coat pocket. I wedged the flat end into the door jamb right by the striker plate. I leaned my weight into it. The wood groaned. I pushed harder, ignoring the pain in my old shoulder. With a loud crack, the wood gave way and the door swung open. The smell hit me before I even took a step down. It was not the smell of a gym or wine. It was the smell of sickness, of bleach trying to cover up urine and sweat. It was the smell of a cage. I descended the stairs, my hand gripping the tire iron. The basement lights were off, but there was a single construction work light clamped to an exposed pipe, casting harsh shadows across the room. Dad. The voice was a whisper, cracked and dry. I looked toward the corner where the squat rack used to be. My knees almost gave out. Brandon was there. But he was not the strong, confident man I knew. He was a skeleton. His cheeks were sunken, covered in a thick, patchy beard. He was wearing only a pair of soiled boxers and a t-shirt that was torn at the collar. His right leg was encased in a plaster cast that looked gray and filthy. But the cast was not what stopped my heart. Around his left ankle, the healthy one, was a chain. It was a heavy-gauge steel chain, the kind used for towing vehicles. It was padlocked to his ankle, and the other end was wrapped around the steel support column of the house. My son, my boy, chained like a dog in his own home. I ran to him. I dropped the tire iron and fell to my knees. Brandon flinched when I touched him, as if he expected to be hit. "It is me, son. It is Dad. I am here." His eyes focused on me. They were wild, dilated. Panic flooded his face. "Dad, no. You have to go. They will see you. They said if you came, they would put you in the home. They said you are crazy too." I tried to pull the chain. It was solid steel. I looked at his leg. The skin under the shackle was raw and bleeding. "How long, Brandon? How long have they done this?" He started to cry, dry, heaving sobs. "Since October. Since I found the bank transfers. Vanessa sent $500,000 to her parents. I told her I was going to the police." Gordon pushed me. He pushed me down the main stairs. My leg snapped, Dad. I heard it snap. I tried to crawl to the door, but Beatrice was there. She injected me with something. When I woke up, I was here, and the chain was on. I felt a murder coming on. A cold, hard desire to go upstairs and end 3 lives. But Brandon grabbed my wrist. His grip was weak. "Dad, listen. Dr. Aris, they have a doctor. He comes here. He gives me shots. He keeps me confused. They tell everyone I am an addict. That I got hooked on pain meds after the accident. That I am violent. That I am psychotic. They have papers, Dad. They have medical papers signed by this doctor saying I am a danger to myself. That this is for my own protection." I looked at the table next to his mattress. There were bottles of pills, antipsychotics, sedatives, high-grade opioids. They were drugging him to keep him compliant and using the drugs to build a narrative of addiction. It was evil. It was brilliant and evil. "We have to get you out. Now." I stood up and grabbed the tire iron again. I was going to smash the chain. I was going to smash the column if I had to. Well, well, well. Look what the blizzard blew in. I spun around. Vanessa was standing at the top of the stairs. She was wearing a red silk dress, holding a glass of red wine. She did not look scared. She looked annoyed, like she had found a rat in her pantry. She took a sip of wine and descended the stairs slowly, her heels clicking on the concrete. "Jackson, I told Brandon to tell you not to come. It is really for your own safety. The roads are terrible for an old man with bad eyesight. My eyesight is fine, Vanessa. Give me the key. Now, or I will take it from you." I raised the tire iron. Vanessa laughed. A cold, sharp sound. "You are going to hit a woman, Jackson. With a tire iron. Go ahead. There are cameras in the corners. See them. They are recording right now. It will play perfectly for the judge. Violent, estranged father breaks into the home of his grieving daughter-in-law and attacks her while she cares for her mentally ill husband. You will rot in prison, Jackson, and Brandon will still be here right where he belongs." She was right. I saw the red blink of the camera lens in the shadows. I lowered the iron. "Why are you doing this? He is your husband. He is a cash cow, Jackson. That is all he ever was. But he got greedy. He wanted to cut us off. He wanted to divorce me. We could not let that happen. Not when the trust fund matures on December 26th. December 26th. That was in 2 days. 2 zones. The day Brandon turned 35. The day his grandmother's trust fund fully vested. $5 million. He has to sign for it, Vanessa. He will never sign it over to you." "Oh, he will." She smiled, looking at Brandon with contempt. "Dr. Aris has him on a cocktail that makes him very suggestible. And if he refuses, well, Gordon has a way of being very persuasive." Speaking of Gordon. I heard the heavy footsteps behind me. I turned. Gordon stood at the bottom of the stairs. He was a big man, soft in the middle but heavy. In his hands he held a 12-gauge shotgun. It was leveled at my chest. "Trespassing, Jackson. In the state of Colorado, I can shoot an intruder who threatens my family. And you look very threatening with that tire bar." My heart hammered against my ribs. I calculated the distance. 10 feet. I could throw the iron. I might hit him. But he would pull the trigger. At this range, the buckshot would cut me in half. I looked at Brandon. He was shaking his eyes wide with terror. If I died here tonight, nobody would know the truth. They would spin a story about a crazy father breaking in. Brandon would remain chained until he signed the papers, and then they would likely overdose him and call it a tragedy. I could not die. I had to be smarter. I had to be the general I was when I ran my company, not the emotional father. I lowered the tire iron slowly. I dropped it on the concrete. It rang out like a bell. Okay. Okay, Gordon. You win. I am leaving. I just wanted to see my son. You saw him, Vanessa said, stepping closer to Brandon and placing a hand on his shoulder possessively. He is sick, Jackson. Look at him. He is a junkie. We have to restrain him or he claws his own eyes out. It breaks my heart, really. Brandon whimpered. The drugs were kicking in again, or maybe it was the trauma. He looked at me with pleading eyes, but I forced myself to look away. I had to sell the defeat. I had to make them believe I was just a helpless old man. I understand, I said, my voice cracking. I didn't know it was this bad. I don't know what I thought. You thought you could save the day. Gordon sneered, lowering the gun slightly, but keeping his finger on the trigger. Go home, trucker. Go back to your trailer park or wherever you live now. If you come back, I will call the sheriff. And Dr. Aris. I am sure he would love to evaluate you. Senility runs in the family, doesn't it? I nodded, hunched my shoulders, and walked toward the stairs. I passed Vanessa. She smelled of expensive perfume and rot. I passed Gordon. He smelled of scotch and gunpowder. I walked up the stairs, my back burning, expecting a bullet at any second. I did not look back at Brandon. I could not. If I looked back, I would stay and fight, and we would both die. I walked out the back door into the snow. The wind hit me instantly, freezing the sweat on my neck. I stumbled toward my truck, acting the part of the broken, defeated old man, just in case they were watching from the windows. I climbed into the cab of my F-150. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. I started the engine. I drove down the driveway, past the luxury cars, past the festive lights, but as soon as I turned onto the main road out of sight of the house, my demeanor changed. The shaking stopped. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles popped. I was not leaving. I was not going home. I reached under the passenger seat and pulled out a hard plastic case. Inside was a satellite phone. I kept it for emergencies when I was hauling cargo in dead zones. It was untraceable. I dialed a number I had not called in 5 years. Sullivan, I said when the line connected. Jack. It is 3 a.m. Is everything okay? Sullivan was my corporate attorney. The man who helped me build my empire. The man who knew where every body was buried because he helped dig the holes, legally speaking. No, Sullivan. Nothing is okay. I need you to wake up. I need you to activate the ghost protocol. There was a pause on the line. Sullivan's voice shifted from sleepy to razor sharp. Ghost protocol. Jack, that is the nuclear option. Who are we targeting? My in-laws. They have Brandon. They have him chained in the basement, Sullivan. They are torturing him for the trust fund money. Jesus. Do you want me to call the FBI? No. I said, my voice cold as the ice on the windshield. If we call the feds, they will claim medical necessity. They have a crooked doctor. It will become a legal battle, and they will move him or kill him before we get a court order. I need to destroy them, Sullivan. I need to strip them naked in the snow. I want to know who holds their debt. I want to know who holds the mortgage on that house. I want to know every dirty secret they have ever tried to hide. I am on it, Sullivan said. Give me 2 hours. 2 hours. I hung up the phone. I pulled the truck into a scenic overlook that looked down on the valley. I could see the lights of Brandon's house in the distance. They were still partying. They thought they had won. They thought they had scared off the old trucker. They had no idea that the old trucker was sitting on $80 million of liquid assets. They had no idea that the house they were standing in, the house they thought belonged to Brandon, was actually collateral on a private loan held by a shell company I owned. I had set it up that way years ago to protect Brandon in case of a lawsuit. He didn't even know I was the lender. I watched the house. My anger was a cold engine humming in my chest. You want to play games with chains and laws, Vanessa. You want to talk about property rights, Gordon. I reached into the glove box and pulled out a thick envelope. It contained the deed to the land their house sat on. Not the house, the land. A little legal loophole I had exploited when Brandon built the place. I put the truck in gear. I wasn't going home. I was going to crash their party. But this time I wasn't going in through the back door. I was going to walk in through the front door, and I was going to bring hell with me. But first I needed to make them think they had already won. I needed them to get sloppy. I picked up my burner phone and texted Brandon's number, which I knew Vanessa had. I am going home. Please don't hurt him. I won't say anything. I just want him to be safe. I waited. A minute later, a reply came. Smart choice, Jack. He is fine. Just stay away and he stays safe. I stared at the text. I am coming for you, son. And when I am done with them, they will wish they had frozen to death in this storm. I turned the truck around. It was time to go back. But this time I had a plan. And it started with a winning lottery ticket. Or at least one that looked real enough to make greedy people lose their minds. I turned the truck off at the bottom of the driveway and walked back up through the snow. The wind was screaming now, a whiteout that made it impossible to see more than 5 feet ahead. It was the perfect cover for a man pretending to be defeated by nature. I banged on the heavy front door, hunching my shoulders, letting the snow pile up on my hat. When the door opened, warmth and the smell of expensive cologne rushed out. It was Gordon. He had a glass of scotch in one hand and that shotgun still leaning against the wall behind him. He looked at me like I was a stray dog that had wandered onto his porch. I told him the truck had died. I told him the fuel line froze. I made my voice shake, adding a little tremor to my hands. I played the part of the helpless, senile old man they wanted me to be. I asked if I could just sit in the mudroom until the storm passed. Gordon laughed, a deep, wet sound that came from his belly. He didn't kick me out. He called for Vanessa. She appeared in the hallway, smoothing her red silk dress, looking at me with a mixture of disgust and amusement. She didn't tell me to leave. A cruel light sparked in her eyes. She told Gordon to let me in. She said it would be good for me to see the reality of the situation. She said I should stay and witness Brandon's madness for myself, so I would understand why they had to take such drastic measures. It was a lie, of course. She didn't want me to understand anything. She wanted an audience. She wanted to parade the broken father in front of her high society friends, to show them how benevolent she was, taking in the trash. They led me into the great room. It was filled with people now. Strangers. Men in velvet blazers and women in dresses that cost more than a year of my trucking salary. They were drinking my son's wine, eating food paid for with his money, standing on floors he had designed. The music was loud, drowning out any sound that might have come from the basement. I felt like a ghost walking through a funeral that was pretending to be a party. Vanessa clapped her hands for attention. The room quieted down. She put a hand on my wet, snow-covered shoulder. She introduced me not as Jackson Reed, the man who built a logistics empire, but as Jack Brandon's estranged father. She told them I was a retired truck driver who had fallen on hard times. She used words like confused and overwhelmed. She painted a picture of a man who had lost his grip on reality, just like his son. The guests looked at me with pity, sipping their champagne. I saw them whispering. I saw the way they recoiled from the smell of diesel and sweat that clung to my old coat. Beatrice, my son's mother-in-law, floated over. She was holding a plate of half-eaten hors d'oeuvres. She didn't offer me a fresh plate. She gestured toward the kitchen, telling me I could find something to eat in there, maybe some scraps that hadn't been served. She spoke to me slowly, loudly, as if I were deaf or stupid. She told me to stay out of the way of the caterers. She told me try not to touch anything because my hands were dirty. I walked into the kitchen. It was chaotic, caterers rushing back and forth with trays of lobster and filet mignon. I stood in the corner, invisible to them. I saw a half-empty tray of shrimp cocktails that had been cleared from the tables. Beatrice pointed at it. She told me to help myself. I ate a shrimp not because I was hungry, but because I had to sell the act. I had to be the hungry, desperate old man. I chewed slowly, swallowing my pride along with the cold seafood. From the kitchen doorway I watched them. Gordon was holding court by the fireplace. He was telling a story, gesturing wildly with his left hand. That was when I saw it. It caught the light of the chandelier. A watch. A Patek Philippe with a navy blue dial. It wasn't just any watch. It was the watch I had given Brandon when he graduated with his master's degree. I had bought it anonymously through an auction, so he wouldn't know it came from me, wouldn't know I had that kind of money. He loved that watch. He said it was his lucky charm, and now it was on Gordon's thick, sweaty wrist. I felt a vein throb in my temple. Gordon was wearing my son's luck, while my son rotted in chains beneath his feet. I looked at the driveway through the kitchen window. One of the guests was admiring the vintage Porsche 911 parked under the heated portico. Beatrice walked over to the guest, dangling a set of keys. She laughed, saying it was a little toy they kept around for weekends. It was Brandon's car, his restoration project. He had spent 3 years rebuilding that engine with his own hands. Now these parasites were treating it like a party favor. The rage was a cold, solid thing in my chest. It wasn't the hot flash of anger anymore. It was the heavy, crushing weight of a strategic nuclear weapon waiting to be launched. I needed to make the call. I needed to set the world on fire, but I had to do it quietly. I grabbed my stomach and groaned. I asked one of the caterers where the restroom was. They pointed me down the hall, looking at me with wrinkled noses. I shuffled away, keeping my head down, dragging my feet. I went into the powder room on the first floor. It was wallpapered in silk, smelling of lavender. I locked the door. I turned on the faucet full blast to create white noise. I pulled the satellite phone from the inside pocket of my coat. It was bulky, old-school military tech, nothing like the sleek smartphones the guests were holding. I extended the antenna. I dialed Sullivan. He picked up on the first ring. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I told him I was inside. I told him what I had seen. I told him about the watch, the car, the chains. My voice was a low growl, barely audible over the running water. Sullivan listened to me closely. I want you to initiate the ghost protocol. Sullivan hesitated for a second. He knew what that meant. It meant total scorched earth. It meant bypassing the red tape and going straight for the jugular. I continued. I want a forensic accounting team on Brandon's accounts by sunrise. I want to know every cent they have siphoned off. I want to know who the doctor is, the one signing the prescriptions. Find his weakness. Gambling, women, drugs, I don't care. Find it and squeeze him until he pops. And Sullivan. I want the deed to this house. I want the mortgage papers. I want to know exactly how much debt Gordon is drowning in. Sullivan asked if I was safe. I looked at myself in the mirror. An old man in a dirty coat, eyes burning with a fire that hadn't been lit in years. I am not safe, Sullivan, I said, and neither are they. They think they are dealing with a senile truck driver. They don't know they just let the repo man into the house. I hung up. I retracted the antenna and hid the phone back in my coat. I turned off the faucet. I splashed cold water on my face, letting it drip into my gray beard. I practiced my expression in the mirror. I let my jaw go slack. I widened my eyes to look confused, fearful. I hunched my shoulders. I unlocked the door and stepped back out into the hallway. The music was still playing. The laughter was still loud. They were still feasting on the carcass of my son's life. I walked back toward the kitchen, ready to eat their scraps, ready to be their fool. For now. Because the clock was ticking, and when the alarm went off, this whole house of cards was going to come crashing down on their heads. I shuffled away from the kitchen, clutching a linen napkin filled with roast beef and rolls I had swiped from the buffet. I moved with the slow, stiff gait of a man whose joints were rusted shut by the cold, playing the part of the confused geriatric to perfection. The guests ignored me. To them, I was just a piece of furniture that had seen better days, an embarrassing relic that Vanessa had been kind enough to let in out of the storm. I watched Gordon holding court by the fireplace, laughing at his own jokes, his face flushed with expensive scotch and the thrill of theft. Vanessa was busy charming a local judge, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her smile bright and predatory. They were so confident. They were so sure that the old trucker was harmless. I slipped into the hallway leading to the garage. The music faded behind me, replaced by the hum of the furnace. I checked for cameras. There were none in this service corridor. I dropped the act instantly, my spine straightened. I moved fast and silent, the soles of my boots barely making a sound on the hardwood. I reached the basement door. The wood was splintered where I had forced it earlier, but someone had pushed a heavy chair against it from the outside. A lazy fix. They thought I had left. They thought Brandon was too broken to move. They were right about Brandon, but dead wrong about me. I moved the chair inch by inch so it wouldn't scrape. I slipped through the crack in the door and descended into the dark. The smell hit me again. It was the smell of fear and rot. I turned on the small flashlight I kept on my keychain, shielding the beam with my hand so it wouldn't alert anyone upstairs. Brandon was exactly where I had left him, slumped against the steel column. His head was hanging low, his chin resting on his chest. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. I knelt beside him. I unwrapped the napkin and held the roast beef under his nose. The smell of food roused him. His eyelids fluttered open. They were glassy, the pupils blown wide, swimming in a chemical haze. He flinched away from me, rattling the chain. "It is okay, son. It is Dad," I whispered. "I am back." He blinked, trying to focus. "Dad. You came back. You shouldn't be here. The doctor. He is coming back." I put a hand on his shoulder. It felt thin. Too thin. "Eat this. You need strength." He ate wolfishly, tearing at the meat with trembling hands. I watched him, my heart breaking with every bite he took. This was the boy I had taught to throw a spiral. This was the man who had graduated top of his class. Now he was eating scraps in the dark, terrified of his own shadow. When he finished, he slumped back against the pillar, exhausted by the effort. "Brandon, look at me. I need you to focus." I grabbed his face gently between my hands. "Vanessa told me you had an accident. She said you fell. She said you got hooked on the pills and lost your mind. Is that true?" A bitter laugh bubbled up from his chest, turning into a cough. "Accident. That is what they told the neighbors. That is what they told the police when they came for the noise complaint last month. Tell me the truth." I said, my voice hard. He closed his eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. He seemed to be fighting the fog in his brain, reaching for a clarity that kept slipping away. "It wasn't an accident, Dad. It was a push." I leaned in closer. "Who pushed you?" "Gordon." He whispered the name like a curse. "It was 3 months ago. September. I was in my office upstairs going through the accounts. I noticed discrepancies. Big ones. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. I thought it was a mistake. I dug deeper. I found a transfer. $500,000, Dad. $500,000 wired to an account in the Cayman Islands. An account under Beatrice's name. I felt the rage rising again, hot and suffocating. They weren't just living off him. They were bleeding him dry. I confronted Vanessa. Brandon continued, his voice gaining a little strength from the anger. She didn't even deny it. She laughed. She said I owed them. She said I had plenty of money and her parents deserved a retirement. I told her I was calling the police. I told her I was filing for divorce and forensic accounting. I grabbed my phone. He paused, licking his dry lips. I handed him the water bottle I had brought from the kitchen. He drank half of it in one go. I walked out of the office to get a signal. I was at the top of the main staircase. Gordon was there. He must have been listening. He didn't say a word. He looked at me and he smiled. A flat, dead smile. And then he shoved me. 2 hands on my chest, hard. I squeezed his shoulder. I saw the fall in my mind. My son tumbling down those marble stairs while that monster watched. I heard the bones snap, Dad. It sounded like a gunshot. I landed at the bottom. I tried to get up, but my leg, it was twisted the wrong way. The pain was blinding. I screamed for help. I thought Vanessa would call 911. I thought even she wouldn't let this happen. But she didn't call. I said, "No." She came to the top of the stairs. She looked down at me. She stepped over me, Dad. She stepped right over my broken leg. She told Gordon to get the kit. I thought she meant a first aid kit, but Beatrice came out of the kitchen with a syringe. Beatrice, the woman currently wearing a fur coat and eating shrimp upstairs. She stuck me in the neck. Brandon set his eyes wide with the memory. Everything went black. When I woke up, I was down here. The chain was on. My leg was in this cast. It was not a hospital cast, Dad. It is plaster from the hobby store. Gordon set the bone himself. I passed out from the pain 3 times while he did it. I looked at the gray, lumpy cast on his leg. It was barbaric. It was torture. And the drugs. I asked, pointing to the bottles. "Dr. Aris," Brandon spat the name. "He is not a real doctor anymore. He lost his license years ago for pill milling. But Gordon knows him from the track. He comes once a week. He injects me with ketamine and antipsychotics. They make me see things, Dad. They make me scream at people who aren't there. That is how they built the story. They invite people over. They wait until the drugs kick in. Then they let people hear me screaming. Everyone thinks I am crazy. Everyone thinks I am dangerous. It was a perfect trap. Create the symptoms, then use the symptoms to justify the imprisonment. It was psychological warfare. Why? I asked. Why keep you alive? Why not just kill you and take the life insurance? Because of Mom. Brandon said, tears finally spilling over. Mom's trust fund. The one that vests when I turn 35. December 26th, I said. Yes. $5 million. The terms of the trust are strict. I have to sign for it in person. I have to appear before the trustee. If I am dead, it goes to charity. If I am divorced, it stays with me. But if I am incapacitated, if I sign power of attorney over to my wife because I am mentally unfit, then she gets control. I finished the thought. She gets the $5 million. She gets the house. She gets everything. They have the papers ready. Brandon said, his voice trembling. They are going to bring a notary here on the 26th. Dr. Aris is going to certify that I am lucid enough to sign, but too sick to manage the money. They are going to drug me just enough to hold the pen, Dad. And once they have the money, they won't need you anymore. I said the words hanging heavy in the cold air. Brandon nodded. I am dead, Dad. As soon as the ink is dry, I am going to have an overdose, a tragic end to a troubled soul. That is the script. Not on my watch, I said. I stood up. I paced the small circle of light. The pieces were all there. The theft, the assault, the kidnapping, the conspiracy with a struck-off doctor. It wasn't just a crime. It was a RICO case. Brandon looked at me. His eyes were clearing up a little. Maybe the food was helping to metabolize the drugs. Dad, you have to leave. You can't fight them. Gordon has guns. Vanessa has lawyers. You are just you. I turned to him. I knelt down again so our eyes were level. Listen to me, son. I am not just me. I am not just a guy who drove a rig. There are things you don't know. Things I never told you because I wanted you to stand on your own 2 feet. He looked confused. What things? I built Reed Logistics, Brandon. I didn't just drive for them. I owned them. I sold it for $80 million. He stared at me. He tried to process the number. 80 million, yes. And this house, the house you think you mortgaged through a private equity firm in Delaware. That firm is me. I hold the note on this property. Brandon's jaw dropped. You are the lender. I am. Which means technically Gordon and Vanessa are trespassing on my collateral. But that doesn't matter right now. What matters is that I have resources. I have a lawyer named Sullivan, who is right now tearing their financial lives apart. I have a plan, Brandon. But I need you to be strong. I need you to hold on for 1 more hour. What are you going to do? He asked, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time. I am going to give them exactly what they want. I stood up and buttoned my dirty coat. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a lottery ticket I had bought at a gas station 3 weeks ago. It was a loser. But to a desperate, greedy mind, it could look like the keys to the kingdom. I am going to go upstairs, and I am going to tell them I won the lottery. I am going to tell them I have $2 million cash, and I don't know how to spend it. I am going to make them think I am the golden goose. They won't believe you, Brandon said. They think you are a bum. Greed makes people stupid, son, especially people like them who are drowning in debt. They see what they want to see. I am going to get them to bring you up. I am going to get them to sit us all down at that table. And then I am going to spring the trap. I checked my watch. Sullivan needed 2 hours. I had burned 40 minutes. I had to buy time. I had to act. I squeezed Brandon's shoulder one last time. Trust me. When they bring you up, just follow my lead. Do not fight them. Act drugged. Act broken. Let them feel safe. I walked back to the door. I pushed it open. I slipped through the crack and pulled the chair back into place. I smoothed my hair. I hunched my back. I put the mask of the defeated old man back on. I walked toward the kitchen, toward the light and the noise. I could hear Gordon laughing. I could hear champagne corks popping. They were celebrating their victory. They didn't know that the man walking up their stairs was about to turn their celebration into a wake. I touched the tire iron in my pocket one last time for reassurance. It was time to perform. I eased the heavy oak door shut behind me, engaging the latch with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet hallway. I wiped the sweat from my forehead with my dirty sleeve and took a breath to steady my racing heart. I had just promised my son I would save him. I had just promised a man chained in the dark that I would bring the sun back into his life. Now I had to deliver. I turned to head back toward the kitchen, ready to play the part of the confused old man, but I stopped dead in my tracks. Vanessa was standing at the end of the hallway. She was leaning against the wall, her arms crossed over her chest, the red silk of her dress shimmering under the recessed lighting. She was not smiling anymore. Her eyes were narrowed sharp as flint, tracking my every move. She had been watching. She knew I had been near the basement. My hand instinctively went to my pocket where the tire iron was hidden, but I forced my fingers to relax. Violence was the backup plan. Deception was the weapon of choice. I hunched my shoulders, letting my mouth hang open slightly. I shuffled toward her, dragging my left foot, as if the cold had gotten into my old war injuries. I mumbled to myself, looking at the floor, avoiding her gaze. "What were you doing down there, Jackson?" Her voice was low, but it carried a threat that cut through the festive music drifting from the living room. I looked up, blinking rapidly as if I was struggling to focus. "The bathroom." I wheezed. "I was looking for the bathroom, Vanessa. This house, it is so big, like a maze." I got turned around. I heard noises. I thought maybe the toilet was running. Vanessa pushed off the wall and walked toward me. She stopped inches away, invading my personal space. The smell of her expensive perfume was overpowering, cloying, and sweet like flowers left too long on a grave. She studied my face, looking for a crack in the mask. "You heard noises?" she repeated. I nodded vigorously. "Thumping, like pipes. Old pipes banging. Is the furnace down there?" She stared at me for another long second, then her shoulders relaxed. A look of pity mixed with contempt crossed her face. She bought it. She believed I was just a senile old fool wandering around her mansion. "It is just the heating system, Jackson," she said, her voice losing its edge but gaining a layer of condescension. "It makes noise when it kicks on. You shouldn't be wandering around. You could get hurt. And frankly, you are making the guests uncomfortable." I hung my head. "I am sorry. I am hungry, Vanessa. And I miss my boy." That was the trigger. I saw a spark in her eyes. Not of sympathy, but of opportunity. She looked at me not as a person, but as a resource. A depleted resource, perhaps, but one she could still squeeze a few drops from. She took my arm. Her grip was firm, almost painful. "Come with me, Jackson," she said. "Let's go into the study. We need to talk. Just family." She led me away from the party into a small library off the main hall. It was lined with books that had never been opened. She closed the door, muffling the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. She gestured for me to sit in a leather armchair that swallowed my frame. She sat on the edge of the mahogany desk, crossing her legs. She took a sip of her wine, and then she sighed, a long, tragic sound that was worthy of an Academy Award. "Jackson, I know I was harsh earlier." She began, her voice softening into a tearful tremble. "It is just the stress. You have no idea what it is like, caring for Brandon. It is destroying us." I watched her performance, mesmerized by the audacity of it. She was talking about the man she had chained in a dungeon, as if he were a burden she carried out of love. "He is so sick, Jackson," she continued, wiping a dry eye. "The treatments, the specialists. Dr. Aris is the only one who can help him, but he is so expensive. And insurance. They won't cover it. They say it is a pre-existing condition. We have liquidated everything. Our savings, my retirement. Even my parents chipped in their life savings to help." I dug my fingernails into the leather armrest to keep from laughing in her face. Her parents, who were currently drinking vintage champagne, had chipped in. That was rich. I didn't know. I stammered, playing along. "It is a nightmare," she said, leaning forward. "We are drowning, Jackson. The mortgage on this house is 3 months behind. The medical bills are piling up. I am terrified we are going to lose everything. And if we lose the house, where will Brandon go? The state facility. You know what those places are like. They will strap him down. They will let him rot." She paused, waiting for my reaction. I looked at her with wide, watery eyes. No, not the state, I whispered. We can't let that happen. We are trying to save him. She said, reaching out to take my rough hand in hers. Her skin was soft, but her touch felt like ice. But we are out of options. We have nothing left to sell. Except, she looked at me, her eyes pleading, her lips trembling. Except what, Vanessa? She squeezed my hand. Jackson, I hate to ask this. I really do, but I saw your truck outside. I know it is old. I know it probably means a lot to you. But trucks like that, collectors like them, we could probably get $2,000, maybe $3,000 for it. I stared at her. She wanted my truck, my rusted beat-up 1990 Ford. It was the only thing she thought I owned, the only asset she believed I had left in the world, and she wanted to take it. Not because $3,000 would make a dent in her imaginary debts, but because she was a predator. Predators don't leave scraps. They take everything down to the bone. It was a test of dominance. She wanted to strip me of my mobility, my independence, just like she had stripped Brandon of his freedom. It is all I have, Vanessa. I said, my voice barely a whisper. How will I get home? We will call you a bus, she said, dismissing my livelihood with a wave of her hand. Please, Jackson, for Brandon. Think of it as your contribution to his recovery. Don't you want to help your son? The cruelty was breathtaking. It was absolute, and it was the perfect opening. I pulled my hand away from hers. I started to shake. I let my whole body tremble, vibrating with a mix of fake anxiety and real adrenaline. I reached into the inside pocket of my coat. I do want to help. I stammered. I want to help so much. I didn't want to say anything because I was scared. Scared of what, Jackson? She asked, her eyes flicking to my hand. Scared of the government. Scared of the taxes. I said, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I don't understand the forms, Vanessa. I don't know how to handle the bank people. They look at me like I am trash. I pulled out the envelope. It was an old grease-stained envelope I used for receipts. Inside was the lottery ticket. I had bought it weeks ago, but I had doctored it. I had used a little printer ink and a steady hand to change the numbers to match the winning draw from the first week of December. To a casual observer, it looked real. To a desperate, greedy observer, it looked like salvation. What is that? She asked, leaning in. I opened the envelope. I pulled out the ticket and a printout of the winning numbers I had prepared. My hands shook so hard the paper rattled. I bought it at the stop and rob off the interstate. I whispered. I checked the numbers 10 times, Vanessa. I think I won. Won what? She snatched the paper from my hand. Her eyes scanned the numbers. She looked at the printout. She looked back at the ticket. Her breath hitched. Her pupils dilated so wide her eyes looked black. $2 million. She breathed. The jackpot was $2 million. I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. I don't know what to do. I have been carrying it around for 3 weeks. I am afraid if I go to the lottery office, they will say I stole it. Or they will take half of it for taxes, and then the nursing home will take the rest because of my Social Security. I wanted to hide it. Vanessa stared at the ticket. I could see the wheels turning in her head. I could see the greed overriding every other circuit in her brain. $2 million. It was enough to pay off the loan sharks. It was enough to flee the country. It was enough to fix everything. She looked up at me. Her face transformed. The disgust was gone. The condescension was gone. In their place was a radiant, terrifying warmth. Jackson. She breathed. Oh, Jackson, you poor, sweet man. You have been carrying this burden all alone. I nodded, wiping my nose. I was going to sell the truck, I said. I will give you the truck, Vanessa. Take it. No, 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 she said, laughing, a frantic, high-pitched sound. We don't need the truck, Jackson. My God. Do you realize what this is? This is a miracle. This is God answering our prayers. But the taxes, I whined, and the paperwork. I can't do it, Vanessa. I am not smart like Brandon. That is why you have family, Jackson, she said, standing up and coming around the desk. She hugged me. She pressed my face into the silk of her dress. We can help you. We can handle all the legal work. We can set up a trust just like Brandon's. We can protect the money from the government. Really? I asked, looking up at her with the eyes of a lost child. You would do that for me? Of course, she said, stroking my gray hair. We are family, and family takes care of each other. She pulled back, still holding my shoulders. Wait here. Do not move. I need to get Gordon. He knows a lawyer who specializes in lottery winnings. We need to secure this immediately. She ran out of the room. She didn't walk. She ran. I sat back in the chair. I stopped shaking. A cold smile touched my lips. The bait was taken. The hook was set. 2 minutes later, the door flew open. It wasn't just Vanessa. It was the whole pack. Gordon, Beatrice, and Vanessa. Gordon stumbled in his face, red and sweaty. He looked at me like I was the second coming of Christ. Beatrice, who had looked at me like I was a cockroach 10 minutes ago, was beaming. Jackson Gordon boomed, his voice full of false bonhomie. Vanessa told us the incredible news. Let me see it, man. Let me see the ticket. I held it up. Gordon snatched it. He pulled a jeweler's loop from his pocket. Why he had that, I could only guess, and inspected the numbers. It looks legit, he whispered to Beatrice. The dates match. The serial number looks right. Beatrice clapped her hands. Oh, Jackson. This is wonderful. We were just saying how terrible it was that you were living alone in that drafty cabin. You need to be here with us. With you? I asked. Yes, Vanessa said. You are staying for dinner. No, you are staying for Christmas. We insist. You shouldn't be driving in this storm anyway. Not with such valuable cargo. Gordon handed the ticket back to me, his hands lingering on it for a second too long. Listen, Jack. Can I call you Jack? We need to be smart about this. If you cash this ticket in your name, the IRS is going to eat you alive. 40% right off the top, plus state tax. You will be left with peanuts. I gasped. 40%. At least, Gordon said gravely. But there are ways around it. If you sign the ticket over to a corporation, a family corporation, we can claim it as a business asset. The tax rate is much lower, and we can invest it immediately. You could do that? I asked. We could do it tonight, Vanessa said. We have a notary coming later. For some other business. We could draw up the papers, transfer the ticket to the family trust. Then we manage it for you. We pay your bills. We buy you a new truck. A brand new one, Jackson. Anything you want. And Brandon? I asked. Will it help Brandon? Gordon nodded solemnly. It will save his life, Jack. It will pay for the best doctors in Switzerland. I looked at the ticket. I looked at them. 3 vultures circling a carcass that wasn't even dead yet. Okay, I said. I will do it. But I don't want to eat in the kitchen. I want to eat at the big table, with the family. Beatrice laughed, a shrill, delighted sound. Of course, you are the guest of honor, Jackson. Come, Come right now. We were just about to serve the prime rib. They ushered me out of the study. Gordon put his arm around my shoulder. Vanessa held my arm. They paraded me back into the great room. The guests looked confused. 5 minutes ago, I was the crazy old man. Now I was being escorted like royalty. Gordon cleared his throat. Everyone listen up. We have a special addition to the dinner table tonight. Brandon's father, Jackson, has decided to join us for the holiday. Please make him welcome. The guests clapped politely, confused, but following the Alpha's lead. They sat me at the head of the table, the seat that should have been Brandon's. They poured me champagne. They heaped my plate with lobster and steak. I ate. I drank. I smiled at their jokes. I let them toast to my health. I watched Vanessa texting furiously under the table, probably telling her loan sharks that payment was coming. I watched Gordon eyeing the ticket which I had placed on the table next to my fork. They thought they were fleecing a sheep. They didn't know they were dining with a wolf. I checked my watch. 1 hour had passed. Sullivan would be ready soon. The trap was almost sprung. But first I needed one more thing. I needed Brandon up here. I needed him to witness this. I tapped my glass with a fork. The table went quiet. I have a request. I said, my voice slurring just a little. Before we sign the papers, before I give you the ticket, I want to see my son. I want Brandon to be here. Vanessa stiffened. Oh, Jackson. He is not well. He might make a scene. I don't care, I said, banging my fist on the table just hard enough to make the china rattle. He is my son. If I am giving you $2 million, I want to see his face. I want him to know his daddy saved him. Gordon and Vanessa exchanged a look. A silent calculation. Was it worth the risk? Was the money worth dragging the skeleton out of the closet? Greed won. It always wins. Gordon nodded. Okay, we will bring him up. But we have to give him his medicine first, so he stays calm. That is fine, I said. Just bring him. Vanessa stood up. I will go get him. I watched her walk away. I took a sip of champagne. It tasted like victory. Just a little longer, son. Just a little longer. I sat at the head of the mahogany dining table, a place that, by all rights, belonged to my son. The chair was high-backed and upholstered in velvet, designed for a man of status, but tonight it held a man covered in grease stains and road salt. The contrast was grotesque. To my left sat Gordon, his face flushed with bourbon and anticipation. To my right, Beatrice preened in her furs, looking at me with a hunger that had nothing to do with the prime rib on her plate. Vanessa sat opposite me, her eyes darting between my face and the breast pocket, where I had stashed the forged lottery ticket. The guests, the strangers who had been drinking my son's wine, were gone, ushered out by Vanessa, with whispered apologies about a family emergency. Now it was just the pack of wolves and the old sheep they thought they were about to slaughter. The atmosphere in the room was suffocating. The crystal chandelier cast a warm glow over the feast, but the air was cold with tension. Servants, who I suspected were unpaid or paid off the books, cleared the appetizer plates in silence. Gordon poured me another glass of Dom Perignon, filling it to the brim. He did not offer a toast to family or to Christmas. He toasted to fortune. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass, his eyes locked on mine. I raised my glass, my hand shaking, intentionally spilling a few drops on the tablecloth. Beatrice let out a small gasp, but quickly turned it into a cough. Yesterday, she would have screamed at me for ruining the linen. Today, she smiled and told me not to worry, that they had plenty of tablecloths. The flattery began before the main course arrived. It was a coordinated attack. Beatrice leaned in, her perfume cloying and thick, putting a hand on my forearm. You know, Jackson, she purred, We always told Brandon he got his work ethic from you. It takes a strong man to drive those roads alone for so many years. We admire that kind of grit. It is so rare these days. I chewed on a piece of bread, forcing myself to swallow the bile rising in my throat. These were the same people who had called me a trailer trash derelict behind my back for years. Now I was a pillar of industry. Gordon chimed in, carving the roast beef with a knife that looked sharp enough to shave with. Absolutely right, my dear. You are a man of the earth, Jack. A salt of the earth man. And that is why we are so concerned. A windfall like this $2 million, it changes people. It attracts sharks. You have no idea the kind of leeches that come out of the woodwork when they smell money. Lawyers, tax agents, long-lost cousins. They will pick you clean before you even get the check. I looked down at my plate, playing the part of the overwhelmed simpleton. I know, I mumbled. I am scared, Gordon. I don't know anything about high finance. I keep my money in a coffee can. I don't even have a checking account anymore. I don't want the government to take it. I don't want to go to jail for filling out a form wrong. Vanessa leaned forward, her red dress slipping off her shoulder. That is exactly why we want to help you, Jackson. We can protect you. Gordon has been in finance for 30 years. He knows how to shelter assets. He knows how to set up trusts that are invisible to the IRS. We can handle the burden for you. You won't have to lift a finger. You can just enjoy your retirement. Buy a boat. Buy a cabin by the lake. Whatever you want. I looked at them wide-eyed and fearful. You would do that for me. Even after we haven't been close. Gordon laughed, a booming sound that lacked any real mirth. Water under the bridge, Jack. Families fight. But when the chips are down, we circle the wagons. We protect our own. And you are our own, he signaled to Vanessa. She reached under the table and pulled out a leather portfolio. She unzipped it and slid a thick document across the polished wood. It stopped right next to my butter plate. What is this? I asked, shrinking back from the paper, as if it might bite me. It is just standard procedure, Vanessa said, her voice soothing like a nurse talking to a frightened patient. It is a transfer of asset management rights. It basically just says that you are authorizing us to claim the ticket on your behalf and place the funds into the family holding company. It protects you from liability, Jackson. It means if the taxman comes knocking, he has to talk to us, not you. I reached out and touched the paper. My fingers were calloused rough against the smooth, expensive bond. I pretended to read it, moving my lips silently, stumbling over the big words. It was legal gibberish mostly, but the intent was clear. It was a total abdication of rights. If I signed this, they would have power of attorney over not just the tickets but any asset I brought into the trust. It was the same trap they had set for Brandon, just repackaged for a dumber animal. I don't know, I whispered. It looks complicated. Are you sure this is legal? Gordon slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. Then he caught himself and forced a smile. Legal. Jack, I wrote the book on legal. This is standard. It is how the big boys play. Do you want to be rich? Or do you want to be audited? Because if you walk into the lottery office alone, they will flag you. They will freeze your assets. You won't see a dime for years. Is that what you want? No, I said, my voice trembling. I want the money. I want to help Brandon. Then sign the paper. Vanessa urged, pushing a gold fountain pen into my hand. It was heavy, cold metal. Sign it, Jackson. Let us save you. I held the pen. I looked at the three of them. They were leaning in their breath, held their eyes manic with greed. They were so close. They could taste the money. They could see their debts vanishing, their status being restored. They were salivating. I brought the pen to the paper. I let the nib hover over the signature line. The ink bled a little, creating a small black dot. Gordon stopped breathing. Beatrice was gripping her napkin so hard her knuckles were white. Vanessa's lips were parted, her tongue wetting them nervously. I started to write the letter J. Then I stopped. I pulled the pen back. The tension in the room snapped like a rubber band. "What is it?" Gordon barked. "What is wrong?" I looked up at him. My face was a mask of confusion and stubbornness, the kind of stubbornness only old men can summon. "I need a witness," I said. Vanessa sighed, exasperated. "I can witness it, Jackson. Or Mom." "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "Not you, I need family. My family." Gordon's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. "We are your family, Jack." "No," I said firmer this time. "I mean my blood. I mean Brandon. If I am signing over $2 million, I want my son to see it. I want him to know I did this for him. I want him to sign as the witness." Vanessa slammed her hand on the table. "He is sick, Jackson. We told you. He is sedated. He can't sign anything. He probably doesn't even know who you are right now." "Then wake him up," I said, dropping the pen onto the document. "Give him some coffee. Splash water on his face, I don't care. But I am not signing this paper until I see my boy sitting in that chair right there." I pointed to the empty chair to my left. The chair that had been left empty like a memorial. Beatrice spoke up, her voice shrill. "This is ridiculous. The boy is a mess. You want to drag him up here drooling and muttering just to watch you write your name. It is cruel, Jackson." I leaned back, crossing my arms over my chest. "Call it cruel, Beatrice. Call it whatever you want. But that is my term. No Brandon, no signature. And if you don't like it, I will take my ticket and my truck, and I will take my chances with the IRS." I made a move to grab the ticket. Gordon's hand shot out and clamped over my wrist. His grip was strong, desperate. "Don't be hasty, Jack," he hissed. "Then bring him up," I challenged, staring him down. "If you want the money, bring me my son." Gordon looked at Vanessa. They had a silent, furious conversation with their eyes. They were calculating the risk. Bringing Brandon up was dangerous. He might talk. He might fight. He might show the guests, if any were still lingering, the true extent of his condition. But the money, the $2 million, it was right there on the table. It was the only way out of the hole they had dug. Vanessa broke first. "Fine," she spat, standing up so abruptly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Fine. We will bring him up. But if he freaks out, if he breaks anything, it is on you, Jackson." I nodded. "That is fair. Just bring him." Vanessa stormed toward the kitchen. Gordon released my wrist, but he didn't move his hand far. He kept it on the table, fingers drumming a frantic rhythm. Beatrice poured herself another glass of wine, her hands shaking so much, the bottle clinked against the rim. We waited. The silence stretched out thin and taut. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hall. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Sullivan's deadline was approaching. The pieces were moving into place. I looked at the empty chair next to me. I imagined Brandon sitting there, broken and drugged. I needed him to see this. I needed him to see that his father wasn't just a truck driver. I needed him to see the wolf come out of the sheep's clothing. 5 minutes later, I heard the scuffling of feet in the hallway. I heard Vanessa's voice, sharp and commanding. "Move your feet, Brandon. Walk." And then they appeared in the doorway. My heart shattered and reformed into a diamond of pure hate. Brandon was leaning heavily on Vanessa, dragging his cast. They had thrown a robe over his filth, but his face was gray, his eyes sunken and vacant. He looked like a prisoner of war. He looked like he had been through hell. Vanessa shoved him toward the empty chair. "Sit down," she ordered. Brandon fell into the chair more than he sat. He looked around the room, his eyes struggling to track the movement. He looked at the chandelier. He looked at the food. and then his gaze landed on me. For a second, there was nothing, just the blank stare of the heavily medicated, but then a spark ignited. Recognition. "Dad," he rasped. I picked up the pen again. I held it up so he could see it. "I am here, son," I said, my voice steady and strong. "I am here to sign the papers. I am here to make everything right." Brandon looked at the paper. He looked at Vanessa, who was standing behind him with a hand on his shoulder, her fingers digging into his trapezius muscle, a subtle threat. "Sign it, Brandon." Vanessa hissed. "Your father wants you to witness his signature. He won't do it without you. So pick up the pen." She placed a second pen in front of him. Brandon's hand shook as he reached for it. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, begging me to run, begging me not to fall for their trap. I smiled at him, a small, secret smile. "It is okay, son," I said. "Just watch me. Watch closely. The show is about to start." The sound of footsteps in the hallway grew louder, accompanied by the sickening scrape of plaster against hardwood floors. I gripped the arms of my chair so hard the velvet fabric groaned under my fingers. I had to force my face to remain slack, to keep the mask of the confused old man in place, even as my heart hammered against my ribs like a sledgehammer. Vanessa reappeared first, her face flushed with exertion, her red dress slightly askew. She was breathing hard, not from anxiety, but from the physical effort of dragging a grown man up a flight of stairs. She forced a bright, brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes and gestured to the doorway like a magician revealing a trick. Then I saw him. My stomach dropped into my shoes. They had tried to clean him up, but it was a rushed cosmetic job that only highlighted the horror of his condition. They had thrown a heavy cashmere robe over his shoulders, likely one of Gordon's, to hide the torn, dirty t-shirt underneath. They had run a wet comb through his hair, slicking it back, but I could see the grime ingrained in his scalp and the gray pallor of his skin that spoke of weeks without sunlight. But it was his movement that shattered me. He wasn't walking. He was being half-carried, half-dragged by Gordon, who had his arm hooked under Brandon's armpit like a side of beef. Brandon's right leg, the one in the amateur gray cast, dragged uselessly behind him, bumping over the threshold with a dull thud that made him wince. Gordon shoved him toward the chair next to me. Brandon stumbled, his good leg shaking too weak to support his own weight. He collapsed into the seat, letting out a low, guttural moan that sounded more animal than human. The smell coming off him was overpowering. Beneath the expensive cologne they had sprayed on him, there was the unmistakable stench of unwashed skin, dried sweat, and the sour odor of fear. I saw Beatrice wrinkle her nose and take a sip of her wine, looking away, as if his suffering was a breach of etiquette at her dinner party. Vanessa moved quickly, pulling a small velvet pouch from her pocket. She didn't try to hide it. She played it off as tender care. "He is in so much pain, Jackson," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "The withdrawal is terrible today. We have to give him his medicine or he gets violent." Before I could say a word, she pulled out a syringe preloaded with a clear liquid. She didn't ask him. She didn't check his pulse. She just grabbed his arm, finding a spot that was already bruised and tracked with needle marks, and jabbed it in. Brandon didn't even fight. He just stared at the tablecloth, his eyes glassy and vacant. He was so used to the needle now. It was his reality. I watched the plunger go down, injecting God knows what into my son's veins. Ketamine, sedatives, enough chemical fog to keep him pliable but awake enough to hold a pen. It took every ounce of discipline I had built over 40 years of trucking, over decades of boardroom negotiations, not to leap across the table and strangle her with my bare hands. I had to wait. I had to let the trap snap shut. Gordon sat down heavily next to Brandon, putting a thick hand on my son's shoulder. It looked like a gesture of comfort, but I saw his thumb digging into the collarbone, a silent warning. "There he is, Jack!" Gordon boomed, his voice too loud in the tense room. "Good as new. Well, almost. He is having a good day, aren't you, sport? Brandon's head lolled to the side. The drugs were hitting him fast, mixing with whatever was already in his system. He blinked slowly, trying to focus his eyes. He looked at the crystal glasses. He looked at the flickering candles. And then his gaze drifted to me. For a moment there was no recognition, just the blank stare of a man lost in a nightmare. Then he blinked again. His brow furrowed. He leaned forward slightly, squinting through the haze. "Dad," he croaked. His voice was like sandpaper. I leaned in, my eyes watering with real tears. "I am here, son. I am here." He looked at me, then he looked down at the table. He saw the document. The thick, heavy paper with the gold seal. The transfer of asset management rights. He saw the pen lying next to it waiting. His eyes widened. The adrenaline of panic burned through the chemical fog for a fleeting second. He realized what was happening. He thought his senile father had wandered into the lion's den and was about to sign away a fortune. "No," he rasped. He tried to stand up, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. He grabbed the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "No, Dad." "Don't." Vanessa moved in fast, placing a hand on his chest, pushing him back. "Shh, baby, it is okay. Your dad is helping us. He won the lottery, honey. Isn't that wonderful? He is signing it over to the trust so we can get you the best help," Liar Brandon shouted, but it came out as a slur. He looked at me, his eyes wild with desperation. "Dad, run. They are lying. There is no help. They are devils. They are going to kill us." Gordon laughed, a nervous barking sound. "See, Jack. He is hallucinating again. The paranoia is a side effect. He thinks everyone is out to get him." "Don't sign it," Brandon begged, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his cheeks. He reached out and grabbed my wrist, his grip weak and trembling. "Please, Dad. You don't understand. They kept me in the dark. They broke my leg. They are stealing everything. Do not give them a dime." It broke my heart to see him like this. He was trying to protect me. Even in his broken, drugged state, chained and beaten, his first instinct was to save his father from being scammed. He didn't care about the money. He cared about me. He was a good man. A better man than I deserved. I looked at Vanessa. She was glaring at Brandon, her eyes promising pain later. Gordon had moved his hand to the back of Brandon's neck, squeezing hard enough to leave a bruise. "Ignore him, Jack," Gordon said, his voice tight. "Just sign the paper. Let's get this over with so we can get him back to bed." I looked at Brandon. I needed to calm him down. I needed him to stop fighting so they wouldn't hurt him right here in front of me. But I couldn't tell him the whole plan. Not with them listening. I had to use the one thing they couldn't intercept: the past. When Brandon was a kid, I used to take him out in the rig during the summers. We would drive cross-country, just the two of us. We had a CB radio, and he loved talking on it. We had codes, secret phrases that meant everything was okay, that we were safe, that we were going home. One phrase meant the job was done, the cargo was delivered, and the check was in the bank. I pulled my hand from his grip, but I didn't pull away. Instead, I reached out and cupped his face. I leaned in close so our foreheads were almost touching. I ignored the smell. I ignored the filth. I looked deep into his dilated pupils. "Brandon," to me. I whispered soft enough that Gordon couldn't hear over the humming of the refrigerator. "Dad, please," he sobbed. I squeezed his neck gently. "Son, listen. The eagle has landed." Brandon went still. He stopped breathing for a second. His eyes locked onto mine. The eagle has landed. It was the code. It meant victory. It meant the cavalry was here. It meant Dad was in control. He searched my face looking for the senile old man, but he didn't find him. He found Jackson Reed, the CEO, the man who stared down union strikes and hostile takeovers. He saw the fire in my eyes that I had been hiding all night. The confusion in his face melted away, replaced by a sudden, sharp shock. He blinked, and for the first time the fog seemed to clear. He looked at the document again. Then he looked at the lottery ticket peeking out of my pocket. He looked at Vanessa preening in her red dress, and he understood. It was a play, a con. And I was the grifter. His body relaxed. He slumped back into the chair, but it wasn't defeat this time. It was surrender to the plan. He looked at me and gave the tiniest, almost imperceptible nod. Vanessa misinterpreted the silence. "See," she said, letting out a breath she had been holding. "The medicine is kicking in. He is calmer now. He knows we are trying to help." I sat back, straightening my coat. "He is a good boy," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "He just worries about his old man." I picked up the pen. The weight of it felt good in my hand. I looked at Gordon. I looked at Beatrice. I looked at Vanessa. They were leaning in again, drawn to the pen like moths to a flame. "Okay," I said. "I will sign. But Brandon has to sign as witness, right next to me." Gordon hesitated, looking at Brandon's shaking hands. "Can he even write?" I looked at my son. "Can you write, boy?" Brandon looked at Gordon. A flash of pure hatred crossed his face, but he smoothed it over quickly, burying it deep. "Yes," he rasped. "I can write. Give me the pen." Vanessa slid the paper toward us. I signed my name with a flourish. Jackson Reed. Not Jack. Jackson. The name on the bank accounts. The name on the deeds. I slid the paper to Brandon. He took the pen. His hand shook, but he managed to scrawl his signature on the witness line. "It is done," Beatrice squealed, clapping her hands together. "Oh, Jackson, you have made us all so very happy." Gordon grabbed the paper, blowing on the ink, as if it were a holy relic. He folded it and shoved it into his jacket pocket. "We will file this first thing in the morning," he said, his voice trembling with greed. "And then, Jack, we will get you that new truck." I smiled. A cold predator's smile that they were too drunk on victory to notice. "Actually," I said, standing up slowly, "I think I left my reading glasses in the truck. I need to go get them. I want to read the fine print on that ticket one more time before we celebrate." Vanessa frowned. "You can't go out there, Jackson. It is freezing." "I will be right back," I said, patting her hand. "Just 2 minutes. Keep the champagne on ice." I walked out of the dining room. I walked down the hall. I opened the front door and stepped out into the snow. The wind had died down. The storm was breaking. I walked to my truck. I didn't open the door. Instead, I walked past it to the edge of the driveway, where the darkness of the forest began. A figure stepped out from the trees. He was wearing a black tactical coat and holding a briefcase. Behind him, 3 other men materialized from the shadows, silent and imposing. "Sullivan," I said. Jack Sullivan replied, his breath steaming in the cold air. I took the briefcase from him. "Did you get it?" "I got it all," Sullivan said. "The deed, the mortgage, the debt ledger, and we found the doctor. He is in custody." He sang like a bird, Jack. He told the feds everything. "Good," I said. I opened the briefcase. Inside was a single file folder and a small high-definition camera designed to be worn on a lapel. I clipped the camera to my coat. I tucked the file under my arm. "Are you ready?" Sullivan asked. I looked back at the house. I could see them through the window. Gordon was pouring more wine. Vanessa was laughing. Brandon was sitting there, watching them, waiting for the signal. "I am ready," I said. "Let's go ruin their Christmas." The cold air hit me like a physical blow the moment I stepped off the porch, washing away the smell of roasted meat and expensive perfume that clung to my clothes. I took a deep breath, letting the freezing wind scour my lungs. For a few seconds I stood there in the snow, letting my shoulders drop, letting the act of the confused geriatric fall away. I was not Jack the broken-down trucker anymore. I was Jackson Reed, and I was about to execute a hostile takeover of my own life. I trudged toward my truck, my boots crunching loudly on the packed ice. I made a show of patting my pockets, searching for the non-existent glasses, just in case anyone was watching from the window. I opened the door of the F-150 and leaned inside, but I did not reach for glasses. I reached for the hood release. I popped it, just to add to the theater of a man having vehicle trouble. Then I walked around the front of the truck and kept walking into the darkness where the driveway curved behind a row of blue spruce trees. Sullivan was waiting. He was a shadow within a shadow, standing next to a black SUV that was running silent and dark. He didn't look like a lawyer tonight. He looked like a field commander. He was wearing a tactical coat over his suit, and his breath plumed in the air like dragon smoke. Behind him, I saw the silhouettes of 3 other men. Big men. The kind of men who didn't need to raise their voices to clear a room. Private security. The best money could buy. Jack Sullivan said, his voice low and gravelly. "You look like hell." "I feel like it," I replied. "Tell me you have good news." "Better than good," Sullivan said, reaching into the back seat of the SUV. He pulled out a thick leather folio. He opened it under the dome light of the car, shielding the glow with his body. "We cracked the shell company Gordon has been using. He is not just in debt, Jack. He is underwater. He owes the Russian mob in Chicago about $300,000. That is why they are so desperate for the trust fund. They are on a deadline. If they don't pay by New Year's, they are dead men walking." I nodded, looking at the documents. It made sense. Desperation breeds brutality. "And the doctor?" I asked. "Dr. Aris is currently singing for the FBI," Sullivan said with a grim smile. "We caught him trying to board a flight to Mexico an hour ago. He confirmed everything. The fake diagnosis, the illegal prescriptions, the kickbacks he was getting from Gordon. He gave us the whole timeline." I felt a wave of relief so strong my knees almost buckled. We had them. We had them on kidnapping, fraud, and conspiracy. I could call the cops right now and end it. But I wasn't done. I wanted to see the look on their faces when the floor dropped out. I wanted to be the one to pull the lever. Sullivan flipped to the next page in the folio. "But this, Jack. This is the kill shot. This is the one you asked for." I looked at the document. It was a property deed, a mortgage contract dated 5 years ago. "I remember this," I said, running my finger over the signature. "Brandon's signature." Sullivan nodded. 5 years ago, Brandon needed capital to start his firm. He didn't want to ask you for money because he wanted to make it on his own. So he took out a private loan against this house, a massive loan. He thought he was borrowing from a venture capital group in Delaware called Apex Holdings. I smiled, a cold, humorless twisting of my lips. "And he never knew Apex Holdings was me." "Exactly," Sullivan said. "You own the note, Jack. You are the bank." But here is the kicker. I checked the terms of the loan. There is a clause, a standard protection clause for the lender. If the property is used for illegal activities, or if the borrower is under duress, the lender has the right to immediate foreclosure and eviction. No court order needed. Immediate possession. I stared at the paper. It was a beautiful thing. It meant that Gordon and Vanessa weren't just criminals. They were squatters. They were trespassing on my land in my house, holding my son prisoner on property that belonged to me. "Vanessa doesn't know?" I asked. "No," Sullivan said, closing the folio. "She thinks the mortgage is with a bank. She thinks she has months before foreclosure proceedings would start. She has no idea she is standing on trapdoor, and you are holding the rope." I took the folio. It felt heavy like a weapon. "Okay," I said. "I have what I need. Give me the camera." Sullivan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. It looked exactly like a button on a flannel shirt. He stepped forward and deftly attached it to my coat, replacing the second button from the top. He tapped it once and a tiny, almost invisible green light blinked on the back. "It is live," Sullivan said. "It is streaming directly to our cloud and to the tablet in the SUV. We will see everything you see. We will hear everything you hear." "Good," I said, buttoning the coat. "I want a record. I want the judge to see their faces when they think they have won. I want the jury to hear Vanessa laughing while my son bleeds." "Be careful," Jack Sullivan said, his hand gripping my shoulder. "Gordon is desperate. Desperate men do stupid things. If he goes for that shotgun again. If he goes for the shotgun," I said, my voice flat, "I will break his arm before he can lift it. I am done playing the victim." Sullivan signaled to the security team. They moved forward, stepping out of the shadows. "We will be right behind you," Sullivan said. "Give the signal and we breach." 30 seconds. "The signal is checkmate," I said. I turned away from them and walked back toward the driveway. The wind had picked up again, stinging my cheeks, but I barely felt it. My mind was sharp, clear, and cold. I replayed the plan in my head. Walk in, sign the paper. Let them gloat. Let them incriminate themselves one last time on camera, and then drop the hammer. I reached my truck and slammed the hood shut. I shuffled my feet, getting back into character. I hunched my shoulders, letting my head hang low. I was the old man again. The mark, the fool. I walked up the steps to the front door. I could hear them inside. Laughter. High-pitched and manic. They were celebrating. They thought they had pulled it off. They thought the old man was outside fumbling for his glasses while they counted their millions. I opened the door and stepped into the warmth. The smell of the house made me gag now. It smelled of greed. I walked down the hall toward the dining room. My hand brushed the button camera, making sure it was straight. "I am coming for you, son," I thought. I stepped into the doorway of the dining room. They were all there. Gordon had refilled the champagne glasses. Vanessa was holding the document like it was a holy scripture. Brandon was still in the chair, his head slumped on his chest. But when I entered, he looked up. His eyes met mine. He saw the snow on my shoulders. He saw the set of my jaw. And he saw the tiny glint of the camera lens on my chest. He knew. I shuffled to the table and smiled a wide, toothless grin. "Found them," I said, waving my old reading glasses in the air. Vanessa beamed at me, a shark smelling blood in the water. "Wonderful, Jackson," she said, patting the seat beside her. "Come sit down. We kept your seat warm. Let's finish this." I sat down. I put on my glasses. I picked up the pen. "Yes," I said, looking into the camera lens hidden in my button. "Let's finish this." I picked up the heavy gold fountain pen. It felt cold against my skin, a stark contrast to the burning heat of the anger that had been fueling me for the last 3 hours. The room went silent. The only sound was the howling of the wind outside and the shallow, raspy breathing of my son next to me. I looked at Gordon. His eyes were wide, fixed on the tip of the pen, like a starving dog watching a piece of meat. Beatrice was holding her breath, her jeweled hands clutching her wineglass so hard I thought the stem might snap. Vanessa was leaning over the table, her lips parted, her gaze tracing every movement of my hand. They were so close. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully manipulated a senile old man into handing over the keys to the kingdom. I lowered the pen to the paper. I didn't hesitate. I didn't shake. I signed my name in bold, confident strokes. Jackson Reed. I underlined it twice, just like I used to do on the multi-million-dollar contracts I signed when I was building my empire. I capped the pen with a loud click and slid the document across the polished mahogany table toward Vanessa. "There," I said, my voice dropping the tremor I had been faking all night. "It is done." Vanessa snatched the paper from the table before it even stopped moving. She clutched it to her chest, closing her eyes, as if she were embracing a lover. A sound of pure, unadulterated ecstasy escaped her throat. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Gordon let out a roar of triumph that shook the crystal in the chandelier. He grabbed the bottle of Dom Perignon and didn't bother with the glasses. He took a swig straight from the bottle champagne spilling down his chin onto his tuxedo. To the jackpot, he shouted, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "To the easiest money we ever made." Beatrice laughed, a shrill, manic sound. She reached across the table and patted my hand, but there was no warmth in it. It was the pat you give a dog before you put it outside. "Oh, Jackson, you have no idea what you just did for us. You really are a lifesaver. Of course, we are going to have to discuss your living arrangements. We can't have you staying here, obviously. It wouldn't be appropriate. But don't worry. We will find you a very nice state facility, one with a view of a parking lot." The mask fell. It fell so fast and so hard it was almost breathtaking. They didn't even wait 5 minutes. They didn't even wait for me to leave the room. The moment they had the signature, the facade of the loving family evaporated. They were monsters, and they were done pretending to be human. Vanessa opened her eyes and looked at me. The warmth was gone. Her face was a mask of cold, hard calculation. "Gordon is right, Jackson. You should probably go now. The storm is letting up. You can sleep in your truck at the rest stop. We have a lot of financial planning to do, and we don't need you underfoot." I sat perfectly still. I didn't move to get up. I didn't look hurt. I didn't look confused. I just sat there staring at her. I reached up and adjusted my glasses. "I don't think I'll be leaving, Vanessa," I said calmly. "And I don't think you will be doing any financial planning. At least not with that document." Vanessa frowned. She looked at me like I had started speaking a foreign language. "Excuse me. You signed it, Jackson. It is legal. It is binding. We own the ticket. We own the trust. We own you." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms over my chest. I looked at Brandon. He was watching me, his eyes clear and sharp despite the pain. He knew. He was waiting for the drop. I looked back at Vanessa. "You might want to actually read the document, Vanessa. I know you were in a hurry. I know you saw the signature line and got excited. But you really should always read the fine print. It is the first rule of business." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, he is having an episode. Gordon, get him out of here. He is blathering." Gordon started to stand up, his face darkening with annoyance. "Come on, Jack. Don't make this hard. Up you go. Read it." I said, my voice cracking through the room like a whip. It was not the voice of Jack the trucker. It was the voice of Jackson Reed, the man who chewed up unions and spit out competitors. Gordon froze. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time that night. He saw the set of my jaw. He saw the cold steel in my eyes. He hesitated. Vanessa looked down at the paper in her hands. She scoffed, shaking her head. "It is the transfer of asset management rights, Jackson. We wrote it ourselves. I know what it says. Read the header, Vanessa," I commanded. "Read the title." She sighed, looking down at the paper with exaggerated patience. "It says transfer of—" Her voice trailed off. She blinked. She brought the paper closer to her face. She squinted. Her brow furrowed. What she whispered. She flipped the page. She scanned the text. Her hands started to shake. The color drained from her face, leaving her skin a sickly shade of gray against the red dress. This is not the right paper," she stammered. What is this?" Gordon snatched the paper from her hands, ripping it in his haste. "What is the matter with you? Give it to me." Gordon looked at the document. He read the bold text at the top of the page. His mouth fell open. The champagne bottle slipped from his other hand and hit the floor, shattering and sending shards of glass and expensive wine exploding across the room. "Notice of immediate foreclosure and criminal complaint," he read aloud, his voice trembling with confusion. "What the hell is this? Where's the transfer?" I stood up. I didn't struggle to rise. I didn't use the table for support. I stood up straight, my full 6'3" frame unfolding like a darker shadow in the room. I brushed the crumbs from my dirty coat. I took off the old reading glasses and tossed them onto the table. They clattered next to the broken glass. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the tire iron I had been carrying all night. I placed it on the table with a heavy metallic thud. "The transfer doesn't exist, Gordon," I said, my voice low and dangerous, filling the silent room. "There is no lottery ticket. There is no $2 million. I forged it. Just like you forged my son's medical records. Just like you forged the narrative of his addiction." Vanessa backed away until she hit the sideboard. You forged it. But why?" "To get in the door," I said, stepping around the table. "To get you to sit down. To get you to bring my son up from the dungeon you built for him." I pointed a finger at the document in Gordon's hands. "That document you just watched me sign is a formal eviction notice. It states that as the primary lien holder of this property, I am exercising my right to immediate possession due to criminal activity taking place on the premises." Gordon looked at the paper, then at me, then at the walls of the house. You are the lien holder. That is impossible. Brandon borrowed from Apex Holdings." "I am Apex Holdings," I roared. "I am the bank, Gordon. I am the money. I built this house. I bought this land. And for the last 5 years, I have watched you leeches suck the life out of my son." I turned to Vanessa. She was trembling, shaking her head in denial. "And the second part of that document," I continued, my voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, "is a sworn criminal complaint. It details the kidnapping, false imprisonment, assault, and battery, and conspiracy to commit fraud that I have witnessed here tonight. It details the drug trafficking of Dr. Aris, who is, by the way, currently in FBI custody, singing your names to a federal prosecutor." Vanessa let out a choked sob. "No, that is not true." "It is true," I said, "and it gets worse. I know about the credit cards Eleanor opened in my name. I know about the 50 grand Benjamin paid to the forger. I know everything." I tapped the second button on my coat. "And so does the district attorney," I said. "This camera has been streaming live to my legal team and private security for the last hour. They heard you admit to drugging him. They heard you admit to the debts. They heard you threaten to send me to a state home. They saw everything." Gordon looked at the camera lens on my chest. His eyes went wild. He looked at the shotgun leaning against the wall in the hallway. It was 20 feet away. "Don't even think about it, Gordon," I said, reading his mind. "You are fat, drunk, and slow. I will break your neck before you take 2 steps." Gordon slumped his shoulders, defeat crashing down on him. He looked at the document in his hand, then he crumpled it up and threw it on the floor. "Who are you?" he whispered. "You are a truck driver." I walked up to him until I was inches from his face. I smelled the fear rolling off him, sour and sharp, overpowering the smell of the spilled champagne. "I am a father," I said, "and you made the mistake of hurting my boy." I turned to the room, addressing them all. My voice was calm now, deadly calm. It was the voice of a man delivering a verdict. "You like partying in other people's houses. You like drinking wine you didn't pay for. You like wearing watches you didn't earn." I reached out and ripped the Patek Philippe off Gordon's wrist. The strap broke with a snap. I put it in my pocket. "Well, I hope you enjoyed the meal. I hope the lobster was tender, because this party is over." I looked at Vanessa, who was crying silent tears of ruin. I looked at Beatrice, who was staring into her empty wineglass as if the world had ended. "I am paying for this party," I said. "I am picking up the tab. But the price of admission isn't cash. The price of admission is 20 years. 20 years in a federal prison for kidnapping and racketeering." Vanessa screamed, a high, piercing sound of pure rage. "You old bastard. You tricked us. You ruined us." She lunged at me, her nails hooked into claws aiming for my eyes. She was fast fueled by the desperation of a woman watching her life incinerate. But I was faster. I caught her wrists in midair. I didn't squeeze hard enough to break them, but hard enough to let her know she was powerless. I looked into her eyes. I saw the greed, the malice, the emptiness. "I didn't ruin you, Vanessa," I said, shoving her back. "You ruined yourselves. You got greedy, you got lazy, and you forgot the most important rule of the con. Never mark a man who has nothing to lose." She stumbled back, falling onto the sofa, sobbing hysterically. I walked over to Brandon. He was watching me, his eyes shining with tears and pride. He looked at me like I was a superhero. "Did you get it all, Dad?" he whispered. "I got it all, son," I said, resting my hand on his head. "Every word, every threat. It is over." Suddenly, the front door smashed open. The sound of wood splintering echoed through the house like a thunderclap. Heavy boots pounded on the hardwood. Voices shouted commands. "Clear, Kumar, go, go, go." Gordon looked toward the hall, his face draining of blood. "Who is that?" I smiled. "That," I said, "is the cleanup crew." Sullivan walked into the dining room. He was flanked by the sheriff and 4 deputies with weapons drawn. Behind them were my private security team, looking like shadows come to life. "Gordon Miller, you are under arrest." The sheriff barked, his gun trained on Gordon's chest. "Beatrice Miller, Vanessa Reed, hands where I can see them." Now Gordon raised his trembling hands. Beatrice dropped her glass, it shattered on the floor, joining the rest of the wreckage. Vanessa just curled into a ball on the sofa, wailing. Sullivan walked over to me. He looked at the scene, the spilled wine, the broken glass, the sobbing villains. He looked at Brandon, chained and broken in the chair. His jaw tightened. "We got the feed, Jack," he said quietly. "It was perfect. We have enough to bury them for 3 lifetimes. "Good," I said. "Get the bolt cutters. Get my son out of those chains." One of the security guards stepped forward with a large pair of bolt cutters. He knelt by Brandon's ankle. With a loud snap, the padlock broke. The heavy steel chain fell to the floor with a clang. Brandon pulled his leg free. He rubbed the raw skin, wincing. He looked up at me. "Can we go home now, Dad?" He asked, his voice small, like he was 5 years old again. I reached down and pulled him up. He leaned on me, his weight heavy but welcome. I wrapped my arm around him, holding him up, supporting him just like I had when he learned to walk. "Yes, son," I said. "We are going home, and they are going to hell." I walked him toward the door, past the police who were cuffing Gordon and Beatrice, past Vanessa, who was being dragged screaming from the sofa. I didn't look at them. They didn't exist anymore. They were just ghosts fading in the rearview mirror. I walked my son out into the snow. The storm had passed. The air was crisp and clean. The stars were out, shining bright and cold above the mountains. I helped Brandon into the passenger seat of my old truck. I climbed into the driver's side. I started the engine. It roared to life, a comforting, familiar sound. As we drove down the driveway, I looked in the mirror one last time. I saw the flashing lights of the police cars reflecting off the glass walls of the house. I saw the end of an empire of lies. I reached over and patted Brandon's hand. "Merry Christmas, son," I said. He squeezed my hand back. "Merry Christmas, Dad." We drove into the night, leaving the wreckage behind us. The eagle had landed, and the wolves were in the cage. The front door didn't just open. It exploded inward with a concussive boom that shook the dust from the ceiling rafters. Splinters of expensive mahogany sprayed across the foyer like shrapnel. Before the echo had even died down, the hallway was flooded with the blinding white beams of tactical flashlights cutting through the dim mood lighting of the house. Heavy boots thundered against the hardwood floors, a rhythmic drumbeat of inevitable justice closing in. Sullivan stepped through the ruined doorway first. He looked like an avenging angel in his long coat flanked by the county sheriff and a full tactical team heavily armed and moving with military precision. They swept into the dining room, weapons raised, voices barking commands that overlapped into a wall of sound. Sheriff's Department. Nobody move, hands in the air now. Gordon dropped the crumpled eviction notice as if it had turned into a live viper. His hands shot up, trembling so violently that the fat on his arms jiggled. Beatrice let out a strangled yelp and tried to hide behind her high-backed chair, her fur coat slipping to the floor. Vanessa just stood there, frozen, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock, her eyes darting between me and the wall of law enforcement that had just materialized in her dining room. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my hands. I just stood there, calm in the eye of the hurricane I had summoned. I looked at Sullivan and gave him a small nod. He lowered his weapon and signaled the team to hold the perimeter. The room fell into a tense, vibrating silence broken only by the whimpering of Beatrice and the ragged breathing of my son. Sullivan walked toward the table, his steps measured and heavy. He stopped next to me and placed a briefcase on the table next to the ruined feast. He looked at Gordon with eyes cold enough to freeze nitrogen. "Gordon Miller," he said, his voice flat and professional. "You are done." Gordon stammered, sweat pouring down his face, melting his spray tan. This is a mistake. He is trespassing. He forged a lottery ticket. He is the criminal here." I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. I walked over to the massive 80-inch flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace. It was the centerpiece of the room, a symbol of the luxury they prioritized over my son's life. I pulled a small remote from my pocket. "You want to talk about criminals, Gordon," I said. "Let's review the evidence. Let's watch the instant replay." I pointed the remote and hit the cast button, syncing it to the feed from the button camera on my coat and the backup audio recorders Sullivan's team had planted earlier. The screen flickered to life. The resolution was crystal clear. The room was filled with the sound of Vanessa's voice, amplified and distorted by the speakers. It was the recording from 10 minutes ago. "He is a junkie. We have to restrain him, or he claws his own eyes out. It breaks my heart, really." Then the video cut to a split screen showing the basement footage Sullivan had hacked into earlier. It showed Beatrice injecting Brandon with a syringe while Gordon held him down. It showed them laughing as they locked the chain around his ankle. Vanessa screamed, "Turn it off! Turn it off right now!" She lunged toward the TV, but a deputy stepped in her path, his hand resting on his holster. She recoiled, backing away, her hands covering her mouth as her own voice continued to damn her from the speakers. I switched the feed. Now it was Gordon's voice booming through the room. I pushed him. I heard the bone snap. "We can't let him divorce you." I looked at Gordon. His face had gone from red to a sickly shade of paste. He was watching his own confession, staring at the digital ghost of his own cruelty. "That is not real," he whispered, his voice cracking. "That is AI. You faked it." Sullivan stepped forward, opening the briefcase. He pulled out a stack of papers and tossed them onto the table. They slid across the polished wood, stopping right in front of Gordon. "Is this fake too?" Gordon Sullivan asked. "These are the seizure orders for every bank account you and your wife possess. As of 10 minutes ago, your credit cards are dead. Your checking accounts are frozen. Your offshore shell company in the Caymans. We flagged it for international money laundering. The feds are already seizing the assets." Beatrice let out a wail and collapsed into her chair, clutching her chest. "My money, you can't take my money." "It is not your money," Sullivan said, his voice cutting like a razor. "It never was. It was Brandon's money. It was the company's money." And now it is evidence. Sullivan pointed toward the window, where the flashing blue lights of the police cruisers were illuminating the snow. And take a look outside. That tow truck pulling into the driveway. It is here for the Range Rover and the Mercedes. You purchased them with embezzled funds from the Reed Logistics corporate account. That makes them stolen property. They are gone, Gordon. You are walking to jail. Vanessa was shaking her head back and forth, muttering, "No, no, no," over and over again. She looked at me, her eyes filled with hate. "You can't do this. I am his wife. I have rights." I stepped closer to her. "You have the right to remain silent, Vanessa," I said. "And I suggest you use it because Dr. Aris didn't." Her head snapped up. "That is right," Sullivan added, delivering the final blow. "Dr. Aris was arrested at the airport 45 minutes ago. He was trying to board a flight to Cabo with a bag full of cash. He didn't even make it through security before he started talking. He gave us everything, Vanessa. The fake prescriptions, the falsified competency reports. He even told us about the plan to overdose Brandon on the 26th. He called it the exit strategy." Vanessa's knees gave out. She didn't fall gracefully. She crumbled, hitting the floor in a heap of red silk and despair. The realization that there was no way out, that the walls had closed in completely, finally broke her. But Gordon didn't break. He snapped. I saw it happen. I saw the moment his brain stopped processing consequences and switched to pure animal rage. He looked at the ruin of his life. He looked at the police. And then he looked at me, the architect of his destruction. His eyes rolled back in his head, showing the whites. He let out a roar, a primal sound of fury. His hand shot out, grabbing the heavy serrated steak knife from his plate. "I kill you!" he screamed. "You old son of a bitch, I will kill you!" He lunged. For a fat man, he moved fast, fueled by the hysterical strength of a cornered rat. He came across the table, scattering crystal glasses and china, aiming the knife straight at my throat. The deputies shouted. Sullivan reached for his weapon, but they were too far away. Gordon was 3 feet from me. I didn't step back. I didn't flinch. I stepped in. 40 years of hauling steel across this country teaches you a few things about physics. It teaches you about momentum and leverage. And before I was a trucker, I was a Marine. Some muscle memory never fades, no matter how old the body gets. As Gordon thrust the knife downward, I brought my left forearm up in a hard block, catching his wrist. The impact jarred my bones, but I didn't give an inch. With my right hand, I grabbed his elbow. I pivoted on my heel, using his own forward momentum against him. I twisted, hard. There was a sickening pop as his shoulder dislocated. Gordon screamed, the knife flying from his hand and clattering across the floor. But I wasn't done. I didn't just want to disarm him. I wanted to put him down. I continued the rotation, driving his arm up behind his back until he was bent over the table, his face pressed into the remains of his meal. I slammed his head down into the plate of prime rib. Gravy and blood splattered across the white tablecloth. I leaned my weight onto him, pinning him there. He thrashed and kicked, but I had him in a hammerlock that would break his arm if he moved an inch. "Stay down," I growled into his ear. My voice was low, deadly calm. "You think you are tough, Gordon. You think you are a man because you beat up a cripple? You are nothing. You are soft. I have eaten steaks tougher than you." Gordon whimpered, his face mashed into the mashed potatoes, all the fight draining out of him as the pain in his shoulder took over. I looked up. The room was silent again. The deputies had their guns trained on us, but they hadn't fired. They saw that the situation was controlled. Sullivan was looking at me with a mixture of shock and professional admiration. I released Gordon's arm and stepped back, smoothing the front of my dirty coat. Gordon slid off the table and fell to the floor, clutching his shoulder, moaning in agony. "He is all yours, Sheriff," I said, my breathing steady, my heart rate barely elevated. "I believe that is assault with a deadly weapon to add to the list." The sheriff holstered his gun and stepped forward, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. He hauled Gordon to his feet, roughly spinning him around. Gordon screamed again as the cuffs clicked shut. "Gordon Miller, you are under arrest," the sheriff barked. Two other deputies moved on Vanessa and Beatrice. They hauled them up, pulling their hands behind their backs. Beatrice was sobbing hysterically, begging them not to ruin her coat. Vanessa was silent now, her eyes dead, staring at nothing. I turned away from them. I didn't care about their rights or their pleas. I walked over to the chair where Brandon sat. He was watching me, his eyes wide with awe. He had seen his father, the old truck driver, take down a man with a knife without breaking a sweat. "Did you see that, Dad?" He whispered, a small smile breaking through the pain on his face. "You went full commando." I reached out and brushed a piece of lint off his shoulder. "I told you, son." I said, my voice soft again, just for him. "Nobody hurts my boy. Nobody." Sullivan walked over, putting a hand on my shoulder. "The ambulance is 2 minutes out, Jack," he said. "Let's get him out of these chains before they get here." I nodded. I took the bolt cutters from the security guard who had just entered. I knelt down at my son's feet. With one solid squeeze, I cut the last link to his nightmare. It was over. The wolves were caged, and the eagle had landed. The sound of the bolt cutters biting into the steel link was the sweetest music I had ever heard. It started with a metallic crunch, followed by a sharp snap that echoed through the silent dining room. The heavy chain that had tethered my son like an animal for 3 months slithered to the floor, landing with a dull thud on the hardwood. Brandon let out a gasp, a sound that was half sob and half relief. He pulled his leg back instinctively, rubbing the raw, bruised skin where the shackle had eaten into his flesh. I did not wait for the paramedics. I dropped to my knees beside the chair, ignoring the ache in my old joints. I reached out and pulled my son into my arms. He collapsed against me, burying his face in my dirty, snow-covered coat. He smelled of sickness and confinement, but to me he smelled like my boy. He wept. It wasn't the quiet weeping of a man trying to save face. It was the guttural, unchecked sobbing of a soul that had been pushed to the brink of breaking and had just been pulled back from the ledge. I held him tight, wrapping my arms around his emaciated frame, feeling every rib through his thin t-shirt. I rested my chin on his matted hair and rocked him gently, just like I used to do when he was a toddler, and scraped his knee. "I got you, son." I whispered, my own voice thick with tears I refused to shed. "I got you. You are safe now. Nobody is ever going to touch you again." He gripped my coat, his fingers digging in like claws. "You came back," he choked out. "You really came back." "I told you," I said, pulling back to look him in the eye. "The eagle always lands." While we held each other, the rest of the room descended into the chaotic finale of a Greek tragedy. Vanessa was not going quietly. 2 deputies had to physically drag her toward the door. Her red silk dress, the one she had worn like armor, was torn at the hem, snagged on the wreckage of the dinner table. Her hair was wild, her makeup smeared into a grotesque mask. She wasn't screaming about her husband. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was screaming about the money. "It is my trust fund," she shrieked, kicking her heels against the floorboards, leaving black scuff marks. "I earned it. I put up with him for 5 years. It is mine. You can't take it." I watched her go, feeling nothing but a cold, hollow pity. She was a hollow shell of a human being, filled only with greed. As they hauled her through the front door into the snow, her screams faded into the night, replaced by the bickering of her parents. Gordon and Beatrice were being led out behind her. The united front they had presented for years, the facade of the perfect high society couple, had crumbled completely. Gordon, his shoulder slumped, and his tuxedo stained with gravy, was stumbling forward, urged on by a deputy. He turned his head to spit venom at his wife. "This was your plan, Beatrice," he shouted, his voice slurring with pain and booze. "You said he was a stupid trucker. You said it would be easy. You stupid cow, you ruined us. Beatrice, handcuffed and shivering without her fur coat, snarled back, her face twisted into a rictus of hate. Shut up, you useless drunk. If you had just killed him like I said, we wouldn't be here. You never had the stomach for it. You are weak, Gordon. You have always been weak. They blamed each other all the way to the patrol cars, tearing each other apart with the same viciousness they had used on my son. There was no loyalty among wolves when the trap snapped shut. There was only survival, and they were both drowning. I turned my back on them. They were the past. Brandon was the future. Let's go home, son, I said, helping him stand. His good leg was shaky, but he locked his knee and stood tall, leaning on me for support. Take me home, Dad, he said. Take me far away from here. We walked out of that house together, leaving the shattered crystal and the ruined feast behind us. We walked out into the clean, cold air, free at last. 6 months have passed since the blizzard that almost swallowed my family whole. The snow has melted from the Rockies, replaced by the vibrant green of aspen trees and the gold of summer wildflowers. The air is warm now, smelling of pine resin and heated asphalt, but every time I close my eyes, I can still feel the bite of that winter wind. I am standing on the sidewalk in downtown Denver, looking up at a steel and glass structure that reflects the morning sun. It is a new building, sleek and modern, designed by the best architect I know. The front doors open and Brandon walks out. He moves differently now. There is a slight hitch in his step, a permanent reminder of the night his leg was shattered by the man who was supposed to be a father to him. He uses a cane sometimes, a sleek carbon fiber thing that looks more like an accessory than a crutch. But today he is walking on his own. He is wearing a tailored suit, not the rags I found him in. His beard is trimmed, his eyes are clear and bright. He looks like a man who walked through fire and came out made of steel. He spots me and smiles, a genuine expression that reaches his eyes, erasing the haunted look that lingered for weeks after we escaped that house. We are not here for his architecture firm today. We are here for the grand opening of the building next door. Above the entrance in bold bronze letters, it reads, "The Reed Center for Men." It is my latest investment. After the dust settled, after the lawyers finished tearing through the wreckage of my in-laws' finances, I decided it was time to stop hiding. I came out of the shadows. I let the world know that Jackson Reed, the truck driver, was also Jackson Reed, the philanthropist. I put $5 million into this center. It is a sanctuary. A place for men who are suffering in silence, men who are trapped in abusive relationships, but are too ashamed to ask for help because society tells them to man up. It is a place where they can get legal aid, psychological support, and a safe harbor. It is the place Brandon needed 6 months ago. We built it so no other father has to break down a door with a tire iron to save his son. Sullivan is there, of course, standing by the podium checking his watch. He is the director of the legal wing now. He loves it. He says suing abusers is good for his soul. He waves at us and I wave back. I am not wearing my dirty canvas coat today. I am wearing a suit that cost more than my first rig. It fits perfectly, but I still wore my old work boots. A man should never forget where he came from, and he should never forget what it feels like to have mud on his heels. The justice system moves slow, usually, but when you have the kind of evidence we had, it moves like a freight train. I sat in the front row for the sentencing hearing last week. I wanted to see it. I needed to see the final receipt printed out. Vanessa stood before the judge. The red silk dress was gone, replaced by a prison jumpsuit that washed out her complexion. She looked small. The arrogance that had fueled her for years had evaporated, leaving behind a bitter, hollow shell. She tried to cry. She tried to play the victim one last time, telling the court she was coerced, that she was a battered wife forced into the scheme by her father. But the judge had seen the videos. He had heard her voice mocking my son while he lay chained in filth. He gave her 25 years, no parole for at least 20. She screamed when the gavel came down. She screamed my name. She screamed Brandon's name. But we didn't look back. She was a ghost now, haunting a cage of her own making. Gordon and Beatrice did not fare much better. They avoided prison time for the kidnapping by turning state's evidence against Dr. Aris and Vanessa, a final act of cowardice that surprised no one. But they did not escape justice. Sullivan unleashed a civil litigation storm that stripped them to the bone. We sued them for assault, emotional distress, fraud, and theft. We took everything. I heard through the grapevine that they are living in a subsidized housing complex on the south side of the city. It is a grim place with peeling paint and thin walls. Their luxury cars are gone seized to pay restitution. Their country club memberships revoked. Their high society friends pretend they never existed. Gordon works part-time as a greeter at a discount store. Beatrice takes the bus to the laundromat because they can't afford a washer. They are living the life they mocked me for. They are living the life they thought I deserved. Fate, it seems, has a sense of irony and a very long memory. Brandon walks up to me and puts a hand on my shoulder. He is solid, real, ready for the speech, Dad, he asks. I am not much for speeches, son, I say, adjusting my tie. That is your department. I just write the checks and drive the truck. You saved my life, Dad. Brandon says, his voice dropping low. You and that truck. I look over at the curb. The F-150 is parked there, gleaming in the sun. I had it restored. New engine, new paint, but I kept the dents in the bumper. They tell a story. We walk toward the podium together. The crowd is cheering. Flashes from cameras are popping. For years, I hid my success because I thought it would protect my son from becoming soft. I thought struggle builds character, and maybe it does. But I learned that there are different kinds of struggle. There is the struggle to build something, and there is the struggle to survive the people who want to tear it down. I learned that protecting your family doesn't mean hiding the truth. It means standing in front of them when the storm comes. It means being the wall that the wind breaks against. I step up to the microphone. I look out at the crowd. I see young men with fear in their eyes, men who remind me of Brandon 6 months ago. I see fathers who look worried. I see survivors. I clear my throat. I don't have a prepared speech. I just have the truth. They looked at me, I say, my voice booming over the speakers without a tremor. They looked at my old truck and my dirty coat, and they saw a victim. They saw a weak old man they could push around. They saw an easy mark. I paused, letting the silence stretch out. They didn't know that the man driving that truck had spent 40 years hauling steel through ice storms and hurricanes. They didn't know that I built an empire with these 2 hands. They made the mistake of judging the book by its cover. They made the mistake of thinking that kindness is weakness. I look at Brandon standing tall and proud. But their biggest mistake, I continue, my voice hardening into iron, was forgetting one simple rule of nature. You can mess with a man's money. You can mess with a man's pride. But you never ever mess with a man's son. The crowd erupts. I feel a hand on my back. It is Sullivan. It is Brandon. It is my team. I am Jackson Reed. I am a father. I am a trucker. And I am the nightmare of anyone who thinks they can prey on the innocent. As I walk off the stage, I look at the sky. It is blue and endless. The winter is over. The chains are broken. And for the first time in a long time, the road ahead is clear. I reach into my pocket and pull out the old tire iron. I don't need it anymore. I toss it into the bed of my truck with a clang. It settles there, a reminder of the night the eagle landed. Let them underestimate us. Let them think we are weak. We know the truth. And if they ever come back, if anyone ever tries to hurt my family again, they won't meet the businessman. They will meet the father. And God help them then. We live in a world obsessed with appearances. People judge you by your clothes, your car, or your job title. Gordon and Vanessa looked at my old truck and saw weakness. They didn't see the decades of grit it took to build an empire. They forgot that the most dangerous men aren't the ones shouting the loudest, but the ones who have survived the storms in silence. Real power isn't about control or money. It's about being the shield for those you love. If you take one thing from my story, let it be this: never mistake silence for ignorance and never ever underestimate a father's love. If you believe that family is worth fighting for, hit that like button and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice. Until next time.